Welcome to this month's episode of the PA Path. I'm Emma Sellers, Chief Recruitment and Engagement Officer. We would like to give a big thanks to this month's podcast supporter, Mac Solutions. I'm delighted to have Kristy Goodman and Amy Terstriep as our guests. Kristy Goodman is the Associate Director of PA Admissions at Southern California University of Health Sciences in Los Angeles, California. She has worked in PA education for 5 years and has been a PA for 12 years. Amy Terstriep has been a pre-professional advisor for about 23 years, 18 of those years at Purdue University. She earned a doctorate in medical anthropology and worked as a professor for several years before becoming the director of pre-professional advising at Purdue. Well, Amy and Kristy, we are so excited to hear from you both today as we dig into this topic of ghosting. We have heard about ghosting from our students, from faculty and staff, and this concept of just not hearing back or leaving folks hanging in the admission process or different stages of that process there. So just really excited to, again, keep having the conversation and digging in a little bit more. So before we start getting to the nitty-gritty of this, if you all don't mind, just telling us a little bit about yourself. And Kristy, we'll start with you, and then Amy, ask you to do the same. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role. How do you navigate this work in the ghosting area?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me. My name is Kristy Goodman. I'm the Associate Director of PA Admissions at Southern California University of Health Sciences, which is a program in Los Angeles, California. So I've worked in admissions and PA education for about 5 years. I've been a practicing PA for about 12 years, specifically in OBGYN. And I'm excited to talk about this topic because working in the admissions world for several years, this is something that we've definitely seen and something that has been an interesting phenomenon, I'll say. And so I think it is something that deserves conversation, and I'm excited to talk more about it with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. And Amy, if you'll do the same.
Hi, I'm Amy Terstriep, and I'm the Director of Pre-Professional Advising at Purdue University. That means I have the very great pleasure of working with students who are from across campus who want to go into various healthcare fields and into law. So it's our job to help students discover which field is the right fit for them, figure out what credentials they're going to need, and then we work with them throughout their application. Our office is also part of the bigger career center at Purdue. So we're part of the Center for Career Opportunities. And that means I get to hear about ghosting not only from other professional fields, but also from industry in general, and that with the hiring there too.
Thank you both. And Amy, I'm actually going to start with you. And you just started leading into this a little bit because you do work across multiple professions, law, and many other areas. Do you see this ghosting phenomenon appear in other professions? To what extent? Does PA stand out? All those good things. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, I don't think that PA stands out as being different. I think it's a thing across the board. And like I said, you also see it in industry as well, not just in health professions and applying to graduate school, although other graduate programs are seeing the same thing as well. So it's a thing. I guess it's a thing. And I don't know that anybody has a firm answer as to why this is happening. But I think this matters because for students, this is a small community and they need to keep that in mind. And applicants can unwittingly cut themselves off from future opportunities. It's considered unprofessional behavior, and it's just impolite in some ways. You have admissions staff working very hard on these things, and I think it can also delay other people being able to be admitted. And your fellow students or fellow applicants who are out there don't really appreciate that part of it too. On the school side, this happens in some ways. Sometimes it's a perceived ghosting and not an actual ghosting. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times applicants don't realize how much time it takes to go through hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. Mm-hmm. So they feel like their application has disappeared into a black hole, but in fact, it's being worked on and it just takes time. So I think sometimes people feel like they've been ghosted when they haven't. It also happens that there are some schools in, again, all the fields where applicants just never hear anything back. And that's really hard. They have worked so hard to get to this point of applying. And this is their future that they're trying to settle and figure out. And then when they're not hearing anything at all, ever, they don't even hear they're rejected. That's really hard for applicants, I think, to be in that position.
Yeah, the timing all around. Again, not realizing how long it takes for folks to go through the applications, and sometimes silence isn't a ghosting per se, it's a we're trying to catch up. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. One other thing just comes to mind in your work on the student side particularly, do you hear some concerns or are there any trends that you're seeing that's why students might be ghosting?
I think there could be lots of reasons, and I don't know that it's the same reason for every applicant. For some applicants, this is their first time having to make a serious commitment on their own. As they applied into college, they had family, they had parents who were helping in that decision. And this may be sometimes the first big professional decision they've had to make on their own, which is scary. I think a lot of times they want to think of it like an RSVP to a party where you can just not respond but still show up and it'll be fine. And this doesn't work like that. The idea of FOMO, fear of missing out, and the flip side of that, the FOBO, which is fear of a better option. And I think that could play a big part where they don't want to commit because if they're saying yes to this, there could be some optimal opportunity out there that they have missed out on by responding. Then I think there's a lot of mundane sorts of things, spam filters, and not checking those, not having room on your phone for a message. Those are things that are fixable, but still happen. They may read and interpret some of the messages they receive from programs as being mass email rather than something directed at them. So they may be less likely to respond to that. They're just busy and stressed and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that can get in the way. Just expectations for communications that are on both sides, really. But those expectations are not always clear to applicants. Sometimes they want to avoid conflict. I liked your program, but I like this other one better, but I feel like it's going to be mean to say something. When in fact, just saying, no, thank you, but thanks for all your time is perfectly okay to do. So I think that's some of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It's a lot. Students and institutions are getting hit in a variety of ways. And I believe that some of the things that you highlighted in the student area could also apply to what the institutions are experiencing as well. Now, I appreciate that. Kristy, leaning in a little bit to some of your expertise in the PA profession and being a PA and that background, as the PA programs, we all have multiple start dates and deadline dates, and there's different parts of each of our application processes. Can you think about other areas in addition to just some of the way it is, the way our PA school process goes? Can you think of some other areas about the PA admissions process that might contribute to some of the confusion that Amy's mentioned a little bit, or just the overall experience that a PA student applicant might be going through?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think in PA admissions, we do recognize that it can be a confusing process for applicants. There's definitely less standardization for PA admissions than maybe some other professions like medical school. There are different deadlines. Some schools have supplemental applications, some don't. Sometimes there's supplemental fees, sometimes not. There's custom questions for some schools on the CASPA application and not others. Different prerequisites, different timelines for application and completing certain requirements. There's 10 different deadlines that you can have across CASPA. And so I think we do recognize it can be very confusing for applicants, especially if they're applying to multiple programs. I think the most recent statistic is the average applicant applies to 7 or 8 programs each cycle, and that's a lot to track, right? Especially if they all have different prerequisites and requirements, essentially. I think that one thing that's so important is reading. We always actually emphasize this in the PA program. Like, it's important to read your textbooks and things like that. But I think this actually starts before you get into PA school. It's so important to read the websites, the CASPA applications, because a lot of programs, I think, do a really good job of explaining the requirements and differences and things like that. Like on our website, we try really hard to make it really clear what counts, what doesn't. We have an FAQ section. And you definitely can tell sometimes when people email you if they've read the website or not with some of the questions they're asking. So I always emphasize that reading is so important, reading emails as well. So like Amy mentioned, like sometimes the emails might seem like mass marketing or maybe they're not like super customized, but a lot of times they have really important information on that. And the longer I'm in this field, the more I recognize, okay, maybe we need to bold things or highlight them to like call out really important components of this email, especially recognizing on our side that, again, maybe applicants are receiving multiple different instructions from different programs, and it may be a lot to keep up with. So I think those make particularly PA admissions a little bit more difficult on the applicant side. And I know there's been some conversations about should we standardize things a little bit more across programs and whatnot. But I think for the time being, as it remains very variable depending on where you're applying, I think just really being engaged, responsive, and reading as much as you can about each program is one of the ways that maybe you can decrease that anxiety or confusion as it relates to the application process.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all so overwhelmed with multiple emails and so much information. So sometimes just pausing a little bit to really focus on what's being sent to you. And Amy, again, I know you wear multiple hats, but thinking about your experience truly with the PA profession and application process, anything else that you might add that might lead to the confusion or ghosting?
I don't know that I have other ideas about what leads to it other than that sense of just being overwhelmed and trying to keep up with everything. They're often still trying to work clinical hours. They're taking classes. They sometimes have family obligations as well. So they do have a lot going on. Now they're entering a field where the expectation is that you're going to be able to handle a lot going on all the time. And so that only takes us so far in understanding what's happening. I do want to agree with Kristy on the idea of needing to read everything and read more. And one of the things I coach students about is if they're going to make contact with a school, they need to have read everything on that website. These are busy people. Don't contact them only to have them have to repeat what is on their website. So that was something when you said that, Kristy, I was like, yay, that's a good reminder.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's take a quick break for a word from this month's episode supporter, Mac Solutions. In the competitive landscape of PA education, staying ahead is crucial. That's where Mac Solutions shines. They're not just advisors, they're innovators. Mac Solutions' state-of-the-art approach combines experience-driven insights with cutting-edge solutions. Whether your goal is faculty development, curriculum planning, or student performance analytics, they've got you covered. Don't just survive in PA education, thrive. Reach out to Mac Solutions today and let's craft your program success story. Learn more at MacSulting solutions.com and connect with them on LinkedIn. Kristy, I'll lean to you as we shift a little bit to this next thought. We had this little thing called COVID that happened, and that caused a lot of PA programs, but just higher ed across the board, to really shift to doing more things in the virtual space. And I know that we have heard from students in particularly that doing the interviews virtually, they have reported that they are experiencing more ghosting in that capacity. But I don't necessarily believe that it's only happening in the interview process, and it's probably across the whole application process. But can you speak, Kristy, to more how this virtual shift might be impacting ghosting, coupled with some of the other factors that we've already talked about, the technology piece, the timing piece, all of those things, and what it might look like across the application process, the recruitment process?
Sure, yeah. I think when we think about ghosting, the way I define that is lack of communication in general, regardless of where in the application process that is. I think programs understand that cancellations are acceptable and understandable. Again, if you're communicating that, right? So if you decide to withdraw your application because you got in somewhere else, we totally understand that. If you decline an interview because you got in somewhere else or you've decided to pursue other programs, we understand that, especially when it's done with advance notice, to Amy's point, so that we can invite another applicant, right? If you're taking a position in an interview, that means that someone else is not getting that opportunity. And so cancellations, I think we all understand that. When it comes to ghosting, What we've seen is we actually see this kind of throughout the entire application process. In our program, for example, we'll sometimes receive an application and request additional information or clarification from an applicant, and then we'll get nothing, like no response. We'll send out a couple of emails, and we actually started setting a deadline. Like, we need to hear from you from this date, because we weren't sure if people weren't getting them, weren't opening them. But after a while, we're like, I think they're just ghosting us. Yeah. So now we actually send the email with a deadline. We must hear back from you by this date. And if not, then we'll decline their application. So we see it there. We also see it when we send invites for interviews. Now, our interviews are virtual. And so in some ways that might seem a little bit easier to be non-committal, because you don't have to make travel plans and get a hotel and a flight or whatever. It's not as expensive, really. It's a little bit easier to just hop on your computer, have the interview, and go back to your daily life. But even that, when we invite people for interviews, we'll sometimes not hear anything from them. And same thing, we now have a deadline where we have to hear back from you, or we'll assume that you don't want the interview so we can provide it to someone else. Even after interviews, sometimes we'll accept individuals and then they just don't get back to us. And we're left with the same question. Oh gosh, did they not see it? Or they're seeing it and they've been accepted somewhere else and they just don't want to tell us. And again, I think it comes back to the idea that we're not going to be mad if you got in somewhere else. We're happy that you got another offer, but we just want to know, again, so we can offer your spot to someone else. And on the last side of that, we've actually almost every year we have someone in our process who has accepted an offer from us. We're assuming that they're going to enroll in the program based on that. They've put a deposit down, and then we just don't hear from them. They don't complete the requirements that are required before they start in the program. And same thing there, we've actually had to set, in our enrollment agreement, specific information related to the fact that if we contact you X number of times over this time period and we don't hear back from you, we're going to rescind your offer. Because again, if you've started another program, then that's fine. Just tell us, right? We just want to be able to offer that seat to someone else. So I think that we're seeing this across the board in all aspects of the application process, which has been a little bit surprising for me, or was initially, because I think when I applied to PA school, I only applied to a few programs, so maybe it was less to keep track of. But I was so excited that I couldn't imagine not responding to someone's inquiry. And as Amy mentioned earlier, it is really a professionalism from our perspective concern. I think that as more PA programs are developing and we see larger numbers of opportunities for students or applicants to apply to, this is probably contributing to some of the ghosting that we're seeing, because they are getting multiple interviews, multiple offers in some cases. And while, again, that's fine and we're happy for you, I would caution applicants to not ghost programs, because as was mentioned earlier, it is a small community, despite the fact that there's over 300 PA programs now. But also, unfortunately, we are seeing fluctuations, I would say nationwide, but particularly in our area in Southern California, where established programs have been put on probation by ARC-PA, where developing or established programs have had their accreditation withdrawn or decided to voluntarily stop accepting students. And so we've actually had, on multiple occasions, individuals who didn't respond to us or declined an interview or whatever, reach back out and be like, oh no, my PA program that I was supposed to enroll in is closing, or they're not accepting students anymore. And you have to keep in mind, if you've acted unprofessionally towards a program like that because you think, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm enrolling somewhere else, if you do need that program in the future, they may be less likely to want to entertain you as an applicant if you've responded that way or not responded at all. The last thing I think I'll mention is that there is an applicant user agreement that applicants sign on CASPA that specifically states that they agree to monitor the progress of their application and respond to all matters related to their application. So they're really signing off on that when they agree to use CASPA, stating, yes, I will check my emails. Yes, I will communicate with programs. So the fact that you're agreeing to that really means that you need to follow through with that.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's something good for particularly our pre-PA students to hear, is that they are agreeing to a certain set of standards when they sign up. And sometimes we all hit accept so we can move on to the next step. And it's important to understand what's in there as well. As we kind of come to the end of our conversation, again, our audience is PA students, faculty, staff, and as we've mentioned, this issue of ghosting is not just a one-sided thing, but very much, again, we're hearing from students and from our institutions and programs that it's happening across the board. Both of you put on your, again, thinking in the PA profession space, when you put on your hats and your roles, what are a couple tips for all members that might be listening that you can think of that we could help curb, again, this real or perceived ghosting that might might be happening. We'll start with Amy and then have Kristy follow up with that.
As an advisor, I'll start with the advisors. I have been thinking a lot about this leading into this conversation and having to think about how I do my own work with students. And I feel like, yeah, maybe I need to rethink it a little bit and be more proactive on talking about this. We tell them to check their email and their spam and those things, but perhaps developing some communication tools for the students to help them. I already coach them on how to call a school. I coach them on how to do appropriately professional email and that kind of thing. But maybe I need to be spending more time with this, developing some templates for responses that students can use and hitting on this a bit more. On the applicant side, I would say just that reminder that communication is key for their future professional life. And that needs to start now, basically. So they do need to be answering all those communications for schools in a timely fashion. Actually, one of my colleagues said to me that they need to exit as professionally as you enter the process, which I thought was a great statement. And then programs, it's so hard. I know they have limited staff a lot of times. They're relying on faculty who are sometimes also practitioners to make all these decisions. But if there's any way to find additional ways to allow students to stay on top of the progress of their application, I think that would help so that they feel like, okay, I know what's happening and that their application hasn't just disappeared, because in that silence from schools, they're reading into that.
Right.
Rightly or wrongly, they're reading into it.
Yep. And Kristy, same question.
Yeah, I think from a pre-health advisor perspective, like Amy said, if you're able to coach pre-PAs, or I guess just anyone who's applying to a health profession on professional etiquette, then maybe that will help them understand what's expected. It may be that they have not had a lot of instances to demonstrate professionalism at that point in their career, or maybe no one has ever given them feedback on what appears professional or unprofessional. And yeah, I think if there's some coaching that could go on from that might be very helpful, especially for people who aren't intending to come across as unprofessional. From an applicant perspective, I think if the idea of ghosting a program or not communicating with a program is coming from a place of anxiety related to communication, then I think recognizing that professional communication is an essential aspect of being a PA is important, because you can use this application process as an opportunity to develop that professional form of communication. There's unfortunately no getting out of it. If you're going to be a PA or in any health profession, you're going to have to interact with colleagues, with patients, with supervisors. And yeah, it is sometimes anxiety provoking, but it's one of those things where you have to take a deep breath and just do it and practice it. And especially when we're communicating over email, that provides a little bit of a buffer there where you can take some time, type your response, and think about it before you actually send whatever it is that you're replying to. From a PA faculty and admissions perspective, I think there is more that we could do. I think looking for ways to communicate with your applicants more often so that they know that you're not ghosting them. Because on our side, to your point, I think we're often busy and we have lots of applications we're going through. And so months may go by between the time when we say, hey, we received your application, we'll let you know if we need anything, and the time that we actually finish processing them. So I know in our program, we've seen some of the PA forums that are like, oh, I haven't heard from them in months. And we're like, really? We thought we just sent an update to you or whatever. So we're in our program always looking for ways where we can add communication steps. Okay, you know what? They feel like they're not hearing from us enough between when they submit their application and when we invite them for an interview. So let's make sure they know a little bit more throughout the process. Hey, we're still looking at your application. Don't read into it. This delay does not mean anything positive or negative. It's just, it takes time to process things. In our program, we only have interviews a couple of times a year. And so there's a waiting period regardless. So I think more communication can be helpful. We can try to respond to emails in a more timely manner, try not to miss emails. Again, we may not be receiving hundreds of emails a week, but certainly I think admissions advisors can try to come up with processes to make sure that they're responding in a timely manner, not missing emails. And I think that it is valid for applicants to follow up with an email if they haven't heard back in maybe a week or something like that. Because maybe they did miss your email. And again, they're not ghosting you on purpose. They just accidentally did not follow up. So I think it's very professional to say, hey, I sent this email a week or two ago. I haven't heard back. Just wanted to follow up and see if you received it. Do you think that there's some benefit to the virtual space today? I think utilizing, whether it's virtual or in-person admissions events can be helpful. So whether that's a monthly event where someone can hop on Zoom and ask you questions directly, or an in-person event they can go to if they live in the area, is another helpful component of communication, because maybe they didn't quite get the answer they were looking for in their email. The applicants feel unsure if they should continue pressing it. So if you can find an opportunity to hop on Zoom and be like, hey, I do have this question, and get an answer one-on-one or in real time, that can be super helpful. So again, in our program, we've tried to establish a monthly information session where applicants can do that. And then also, I think it is important for PA programs to respect the time of the applicants. Just like we expect them to respect our time, you do have to recognize that if you schedule an interview with someone, you should make sure that you have faculty to interview them, and you should have a backup faculty person in case, someone has to cancel last minute. Understand that they did take a lot of time to apply to your program and answer those questions and write their essay and things like that. At minimum, I think they deserve the respect of some type of response, regardless of whether that's we're not going to move forward with your application or we're going to invite you for an interview or whatever the outcome of that is. I think at minimum, closing that loop is really important from a PA program perspective. Because again, maybe it turns out that you do want the applicant in the future or something, and you don't want to leave a bad taste in their mouth about how your program responded to them. So yeah, I think those might be some good tips from each perspective. And hopefully this will help anyone who's listening understand ways that they can really improve communication and decrease that perception, to your point, of real or just perceived ghosting.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that this whole conversation has been very helpful, but particularly the tips to me, coaching and communication are just really can alleviate a lot of this on both sides. And again, everyone's busy. We all have multiple things going on, but it's just that pausing and just keeping people posted either way on what's happening. So Amy and Kristy, thank you so very much for taking time out of your schedule to just chat with us and drop some good pearls for our listeners. And again, just thank you so much. And hopefully this helps folks and this ghosting becomes a little bit less frequent on both ends. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
We appreciate you for joining us, and thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the PA Path. We would like to give thanks again to this month's episode supporter, Mac Solutions. For more information, visit them online at www.maconsultingsolutions.com. Please remember to join us each month as we speak with leaders in our profession, both nationally and worldwide.